Welcome back to Film and Fire for video 2. Today we're going to be talking about glass shop basics. We'll basically be doing a short walkthrough of my studio to get used to the glass working environment. First stop, ventilation. Why is this the first thing we're discussing? 4 reasons: propane, carbon monoxide, nitrous oxide, and bubble trash. All 4 of these things can build up in your studio and cause long-term damage to your lungs. Most lampwork torches use a combination of propane and oxygen to produce the desired flame. During the combustion process, there is still some propane that isn't entirely burned off. Carbon monoxide and nitrous oxide are byproducts of that flame combustion process. You don't want any of these things sitting in your studio. Last but not least is bubble trash. If you're trying to blow out a bulb or a bubble, and you blow too far too fast, that bubble will be so thin that it bursts, releasing glass particles into the air. Without proper ventilation, these particles can float around and be inhaled, causing major lung issues and even cancer. Never do any work in a glass studio that's not properly ventilated. If you go to visit a studio to do lessons or to observe the artist, make sure there's proper ventilation in the studio. I've been in professional glass studios where I've had to remind them to turn the ventilation on. You do not want to spend time in a glass studio that does not have adequate ventilation. So how do you know if your ventilation is good enough? There are 3 things to take into consideration: intake, exhaust, and the smoke test. You always want your glass studio ventilation to exhaust to the outdoors whenever possible. You also need a proper intake. This can be something as simple as an open window or an open door on the other side of the studio. Remember, you want the byproducts of flame combustion and the bubble trash to be pulled away from you, not towards you or across you. Next, you'll want to do a smoke test. Find a small piece of paper or something that's easily burnable and light it on fire near your torch. Please make sure you have a fire extinguisher or something handy as well. Pay attention as it smokes to make sure all of it goes out the ventilation system. Next, we'll talk about glass. Glass typically comes in rods and tubes and is sold by the ounce. We're working with borosilicate glass, or boro glass. The other main type of production glass is soda lime glass. There are major differences in the two, which we'll get into in the next episode. In most glass studios, you will find clear and colored glass. Aside from their appearance, there are more differences than you think, which we'll get into in the next video. Glass tools. Most lampworking tools are either made of graphite, tungsten, or brass. You'll probably never see all the same tools in every glass shop you visit. Italian glass blowers have had a major influence in the styles of tools you see today. You typically see a lot of traditional tools as well as a lot of do-it-yourself tools. Basically, anything that can withstand heat and can help you shape glass is fair game. There are some groups on Facebook dedicated solely to do-it-yourself glass tools. Next stop is the kiln. One of the most commonly asked questions for beginners is, can I get started working with glass without a kiln? Technically yes, but you won't be happy for very long. Anything that's close to 1/4 inch or more in thickness, you're going to want to anneal so it doesn't crack. Glass will expand slightly when it gets hot, and it will contract slightly when it cools. This causes tension in the glass. Think of what happens when you drop a cold ice cube into a room temperature drink and the ice cube cracks. Annealing glass is basically holding your newly created glass piece at a temperature of 1050 degrees and then slowly bringing it down to room temperature over the span of several hours. You'll quickly outgrow 1/4 inch pieces. Some beads are bigger than that. So it's highly suggested that you start off with a kiln. Kilns range in size and price from several $100s to several $1,000s. Using a kiln with a door that opens from the front is a great advantage over one that opens from the top. Next on our list is oxygen and propane. We touched on this briefly in the ventilation section. Propane is the fuel and oxygen is the accelerant. Propane is pretty easy for most people to find. Plan to use about 4 times as much oxygen as propane. give or take. Depending where you live, it may be difficult to find a steady oxygen supplier near you. I live in the Northeast, and the price of an oxygen tank varies from about $35 to $45 per fill. If you're taking classes or renting studio space, most places are using liquid oxygen now. Liquid oxygen is great for high-volume glass shops, but it off-gases over time, so if you're not using it, you're wasting it. This doesn't make it a very good candidate as your fuel for a home studio. Last but not least is the torch. The main tool you will use in any lampwork studio is the torch. Torches range in size, capabilities, and prices. Common brands include Bethlehem, GTT, and Carlisle. Torches are typically 1-stage, 2-stage, or 3-stage, but there are variations of these. With torches, generally the higher the stage, the larger the flame the torch can produce. Most large torches can produce a pinpoint small flame, but small torches can only produce small flames. Keep that in mind if you're considering buying a torch, as you will want something that you can grow into. Well, that wraps up our crash course in studio basics. Come back next week as we discuss the specific differences between clear glass and colored glass. Thanks for watching. Be sure to click like and subscribe and ring the bell.